outlasted my administrator and managing counsel, who are now gone and left me here. I was hoping Tom was still going to be outside when I first got up here because I wanted to say that, you know, I worked with Tom for Tom for several years, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for Tom and his ability to reason and look through things and understand things, even when I don't necessarily always agree with him. And he is someone that I hold in very high regard with integrity. So unfortunately, he had to hear me say that. We do believe that there is an insufficient balancing of harm to agriculture. And when I say to agriculture, I mean to food production. We consider, and I think you do as well, food production to be a beneficial use of water. Mm-hmm. According to USDA's 2,300 caloric intake recommendations for people, depending on whose numbers you look at, I use a figure of about 1,912 gallons of water a day for one person's food production to meet that caloric intake. So it's actually the consumer and a growing population that needs that water. Earlier slides today talked about a 3% impact on farm economy and a 3.8% on farm unemployment or employment were lost to the drought last year. But these aggregated figures, one of the things I learned in 1975 in Stats 101 at Cal Poly was, you know, numbers don't always paint the same picture. The loss of a job is huge, especially if it's your job. The loss of an orchard to bulldozers is huge if it's your orchard. Tom, I think, has a very great knowledge of the hydrology of the Delta, and that being said, he even admitted that the decisions, or stated earlier that the decisions, if I understood him right, on exports is a judgment call surrounded by many unknowns, and I think we all know that, and that reasonable minds can differ. And today I think maybe we saw some unreasonable minds can differ too. Maybe I'm one of them. But against his best educated guesses, we have 3 fishery agencies that, from what I've heard, what I've read, feel that the listed species are protected with these increased flows. So what I would like to state, because of something I heard a little earlier too, is that the board's responsibility for the ecosystems are broader than the Wildlife Agency's narrow focus on these listed species. But that being said, we think that a year in which farms are going dry, people are out of work, out of business, the economy is being impacted, that we need to be focused on the law right now and save these nice haves for another day when we're in better shape. And with that, I will end. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Reynolds, followed by Darcy Luce. I think Darcy Luce spoke. Okay, sorry. Dick Poole, there you are. Okay, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman Marcus, and you are my heroes for listening to all of our concerns.
That's what we're here for.
My name's Rajeen Reynolds. I live in the South Delta, the deep, dark black hole of the South Delta, as it has once been referred to. I only have a couple of comments, and I'm speaking basically on behalf of Delta farmers. Not too much has been spoken of them today, and the issue of salt intrusion. The 2012 measurements of salt in the Delta at Old River and Middle River were 7 times that they were in the Northern Mokelumne River. Those just happen to be the last stats that I have been looking at. I'm here to support the limitations on this emergency permit request. We can't afford more salt in the Delta, and particularly in the South Delta. Fallow is a term that was thrown around earlier today in regards to hundreds of thousands of acres. Mm-hmm. Fallow is a temporary situation because you may have a water supply that comes back. But if you salt the land of the delta, it will never come back. It's a permanent fallow. So I hope you will consider that when you talk about relaxing any sort of water standards. Decision 1641 is the minimum. And I agree that it should be maintained. In closing, nature isn't cruel. We heard so many statements today about how horrible the situation is, and I'm not minimizing that. But nature isn't cruel, it's simply indifferent. I'm glad that you are not indifferent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for staying and listening all day. Mr. Poole, followed by Catherine Phillips. Oh, you're coming for Catherine. Okay, good. Are you in here too with your own card, Carl? Okay. If we had more time, I'd just have you give us an update on the Water Commission then. Mr. Poole,
Okay.
thanks for staying all day as well.
My name is Dick Poole. Thank you all for, I hope you're still able to absorb a few things after a long, long day.
I'm an extrovert. I'm just getting started. Sorry.
My name is Dick Poole. I'm Secretary of the Golden Gate Salmon Association. I'm President of Water for Fish, and I manufacture fishing equipment. I make 800 items that catch salmon, and we export them all over the world. I'm here. I want to explain something to you or brief you on some activity, and then I've got two requests I'd like to lay on you. As a member of the salmon industry, our people have become very concerned about what the drought is holding for us. We're very concerned what's going to happen this year to 16, to 17. As you all know, we heard all the drought stories and the problems with the farm workers today. It doesn't hit the salmon industry the way it hits. It doesn't hit us immediately. The salmon life cycle is 3 years,
That's right.
and if we can get the little ones out into the ocean, 3 years later we have fish. If we don't get the little ones out, we have nothing, and we're concerned that we have nothing. We concluded we need to, for the benefit of the industry, and most of our people really don't know. They think it's business as usual. They really don't know what's happening. For the benefit of the industry, we need to make some forecasts. We asked the fish agencies if they would make a forecast of what the drought is going to do. They turned us down. I think they turned us down because it's kind of embarrassing for them. But they did say they'd help us. So we finally concluded we will make a forecast, and we've been working like 3 months now looking at the impact of the drought. And it is, the more we get into it, the deeper problem we see. We have been looking at only 2 of the 4 runs. We're looking at the winter run and the fall run because those are the 2 runs that could shut us down, one reason or another. And we've gotten all kinds of data. We went to the rivers and the tributaries. We looked at the temperatures. We've got all the temperatures. We matched that with when fish were there. And same thing, there's 3 elements that we've been looking at. Upriver temperatures, which have been brutal, particularly in 2014. We talk about 95% loss of the winter run. The fall run comes later in the cycle than the winter run, and we think the impact on the fall run is going to be huge. Our preliminary
and that's
numbers.
the big commercial fish, right?
Yeah, we do both sport and commercial. The preliminary numbers are really scary. In 2009, 2008 and 9, our industry was shut down. In 2009, there were 39,000 fall run fish came back, and that was it. We're looking at numbers lower than that. It's my personal feeling that probably in 2016 or 17, it's inevitable we're going to be shut down. And worse than that, it's been stated earlier, I don't know, if somebody puts a petition in to list the fall run, I'm not so sure it could be denied. So we feel that's the position we're in. We are working, we're going to review all our data with the fish agencies again, and they're going to help us tweak it. We'll probably have, in another month, we would like to see that you get it. We think it will be worth your looking at. And when you look at these considerations, we need you to look at the fall run. The late fall and the spring would be just as bad, but we just don't have time to analyze those. So that's our situation. We will make that data available to you, and hopefully it will help you with some of these decisions. Now my two requests. First of all, we think the situation is desperate. Please don't make it any worse. It can easily be worse. We don't know what's going to happen this year. There are some things that can be done this year that maybe can help. But please, please don't make it any worse, and you follow us. The other request I would have is that the salmon are in deep, deep trouble, and we have been working for 3 years to develop projects that will bring them around. Some of these projects don't even take any water. But things like, well, there's more loss in the river right now than there is in the delta. Predation, low water years, and we've got 39 predation projects.
Right, which is great.
What I'm going to ask you, it isn't in your charter and so on, but we have not been having good success in getting those things done. The question is, what do? We don't have any more water. We're probably going to be low water. A number of these things will help salmon recover at an early date. I was involved in the winter run. Same thing happened. We worked 5 years and developed a lot of projects. Nobody did a thing till it was listed. We're trying to beat that this time and get a few things going. It's not in your charter, but your word of mouth, your support on some of those things would be very helpful.
No, happy to help. And it's
Thank
part
you.
of the Water Action Plan, protection ahead of the curve. Thank you, Mr. Poole. Next, great, you're up. And then Deirdre's already spoken. Sorry, Ms. Kincaid. Lost. Daniel McGinnis. Pete Garbani. Great, you'll be next.
Good evening, Chair and board members. We would like to thank you for your dedication today and what I've seen is a very thoughtful and considered discussion of a very tragic issue. We really appreciate this workshop. Kyle Jones, Sierra Club, California. Not Catherine. Considering the devastation on the Delta and its species that have happened over the past year, and the high probability that we're looking for another drought year ahead of us, we like the board to take necessary actions to protect the Delta. To that end, we'd just like to echo the comments made by NRDC and urge the board to reject the portion of the TUCP that negatively impacts the Delta and the public trust assets there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garbani, followed by, Trisha. You're next. Gehringer, sorry.
Good evening, Chairman Marcus and members of the board. My name's Pete Garbani. I represent Land O'Lakes. I'm a vice president in member relations.
Love your stuff.
Good. Glad to hear that. I want to thank you, first of all, for your patience today in this long, drawn-out process of the workshop, and tell you that I've been born and raised in California. Even though we're headquartered in Minneapolis, we have a very large presence in California. Almost 50% of our milk comes from the state of California, and we have a very high concentration of producers in the Tulare area. I've heard a lot of talk today. In fact, have learned a tremendous amount about water policy and fish and a lot of different things that really were quite enlightening. But I'm here to represent my producers, owners, employees that we have within the state, which is over 1,000 employees. I want to be very clear, so I'm going to read it from my prepared notes here. I want to ask the board to fully support the temporary urgency change petition in full to allow the greatest level of operational flexibility for state and federal agencies, which would allow for increased pumping to drought-stricken areas. I've got a lot of other comments here, but due to time and the restrictions that we have, I just want to say that the water that we're talking about here can help down in our area. We have an extraordinarily high unemployment rate, as you've heard earlier today. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of those farm workers were on some of my dairymen's farms due to fallowing land and changing of their operations because of the drought. There has been an extreme amount of layoffs in their operations. I would just tell you that I heard your executive director earlier today in his presentation talk about $800 million in lost revenue and $447 million higher pumping costs. And he made a comment that it was primarily in the Tulare Basin area. And I would personally tell you that I have talked with our producers and heard of the increased costs and the lost revenues on their dairy operations firsthand. So it's having a dramatic impact on our owner-operators. You know, I'm a little perplexed, and I'm not very deep in water policy, but the word concurrence, and I appreciate the explanation that was given earlier today, it baffles me that you have those three fish agencies that seem to have concurred. I'm a little challenged, just like you are, trying to figure out what are the real risks to the fish. And, you know, I'll echo what I've heard a couple of other speakers here today say. I know what the impacts are on our dairy economy and our farming economy in that area. The area that I come from, in the Tulare County area, Kings County, Fresno County, we have producers in all those areas. So once again, I just would like to request that you guys reconsider the decision of your executive director and fully adopt the TUCP. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for yours. After Ms. Gehringer, Patrick Porgans.
Good evening, and thank you so very much to the chair and to the board members still here today. I know you've endured a long day, so we recognize that and appreciate it. I'm Trisha Gehringer, Vice President of Government Affairs for Agricultural Council of California. We represent over 15,000 farmers from throughout the state, ranging from small farmer-owned businesses to some of the world's best-known brands like Land O'Lakes. Pete Garbani and Land O'Lakes is one of our members. I would like to identify our comments and support and echo what Danny Merkley said and also what Pete Garbani said, and also add that Ag Council as an organization with members, like I said, from all the way up in the North State throughout the San Joaquin Valley and down into Southern California, all of our members respectfully request the board to reconsider the February 3rd decision to partially approve the TUCP, and instead we ask the board to support the petition in full as it was originally submitted. We appreciate that there was a partial approval, and the staff here probably hasn't heard that enough today, that we recognize that there was action taken, and we do support that, but we encourage the board to take action, to hold a hearing, whatever steps need to be done, and ask that the board go ahead and support the petition in full at a later date when I know you can make those decisions. This would bring the public benefits that so many have talked about earlier today and to our members and to others throughout the state. And also, we definitely want to also state on record that we believe that agriculture is a beneficial use as well of water, as the Farm Bureau said. So with that, I will conclude my comments given the late hour and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate yours. Mr. Porgan, followed by Rain Thompson.
Mrs. Chairman, members of the board, Patrick Porgans, Porgans and Associates, representing Planetary Solutionaries. I'll just be right to the point. I'm not in favor of the TUCP under any conditions. D1641, I went through that 11 years of hearings with D1630 and D1641, okay? I said then it wouldn't work, and I'm not this guy that comes in, you know, like the baseball player on Monday night or whatever the heck they say. I'm not that person. I'm an advanced person. I see what's on the wall, the handwriting, and I give it to you. okay? And I'm saying to you now that I do not believe that the Delta should be sacrificed any longer. The Department of Water Resources and the Central Valley Project all knew that there was only so much water in the system. It was built into the contracts that these shortages were going to occur. And DWR knew that back in 1980 when I had a series of hearings over at the Senate and showed that the whole thing wasn't going to work. Okay, that's all just a matter of fact. Now we want to talk about reasonable and unreasonable because as far as I'm concerned, it's reasonable to say that we have yet to quantify, the unreasonable impacts associated with this decision. They haven't been done. I was in the Delta the other day, and people are very worried. And it is true, you put salt on that land, and that land is basically gone. That's what happened during the Tunic Wars when that 100-year war got done, and the Romans went there and salted the Carthaginians. I brought you photographs back to 2,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. I told you what was going to happen on the west side. That's all happening, okay? That's all taking place right now. Now, I did get some use out of this fish, okay? Now, I'm the kind of person that, I'm into quantitative analysis. I need somebody to be able to document to me what they're talking about. I'm not here to give you my opinion because my opinion is worthless. I'm here to talk about the facts, okay? Now, I looked at the storage up here in the upstream reservoirs and took into account what was going down over there at San Luis. We have 1 million acre-feet more in San Luis this year than we had last year. If we look at the average in the 5 major reservoirs up in the north and include San Luis, we're at 7.3 million acre-feet. The average is 10.9, okay? That's just a little over 10 million acre-feet. So there's not really a problem there. Now, when we talk about public health and safety, okay, I don't have that number as to what that means. How much water are we talking about for public health and safety? Is it 7.3 million acre-feet are we talking about here? I don't think so. And now we saved 450,000 acre-feet of water last year. During those hearings when you were holding on D1641, this Department of Water Resources and the Bureau violated the standard D1485, which was supposedly going to be enhanced by D1641. On 280 occasions, they illegally exported 500,000 acre-feet of water worth $29 million. Now, I don't know what the health and safety numbers are, and I didn't get them from anyone just yet, okay? I do know when you're not releasing water to meet the standard, you're holding back carriage water. Carriage water is the issue here. We're talking about a whole hell of a lot of water. So when these guys are not meeting the standard, they're holding that water back too. And and there was no numeric criteria in D1641 41 for fish. I complained about that. You guys didn't listen. Now, I'm coming back to, is it reasonable to put 400,000 new acres of almonds in between 2002 and 2012? Was that reasonable? When we knew from 1987 to 92 that we were taking orchards out because we were overproducing, was that reasonable? So I said these guys set the stage to put in permanent crops, and now they're talking about, oh, we've got to take this out. Hey, you should have never put it in. That was the problem. Now, if you look at the total amount of water just applied to almonds, and just look at the 400,000, like this gentleman from DWR was talking about. He was with the old school. That's the guys I used to relate to. 400,000 acre-feet is half the amount of, 400,000 acres of almonds is half the water supply delivered by MWD annually. Huh? The 810,000 or so acres that are in comes out to 2.7 million acre-feet. MWD is only at 2.1. I'm not going to save any water, and if somebody wants to come over to my house and give me a ticket, then come on over, okay? Because I'm not saving 20% so that 20% can go for future development or to put new orchards in. This board has, I'm sorry to say, failed. This meeting and holding this TUCP and being dictated by DWR and the Bureau and coming up with 8 renditions the last time, and now it's a moving target. No barriers. No barriers in the Delta. No way. I'm totally opposed to that. And I say that 450,000 acre-feet of water they saved was worth a whole hell of a lot of money. We need to develop a way of punitive criteria to take that money and give it back to the people who are being impacted by an overly committed state water project. And as long as you placate, their shortcomings, then in the long term, and I'll sit down and write a book before I leave this planet, I'm telling you now, you're going to make the situation much worse than it is now. And forgive me and thank you and God bless everybody, because I know it's difficult for you, but you're not going to get anywhere by placating it. Opposed to the TUCP under all conditions. Evidentiary hearing, got to have it. Because I want to cross-examine them. I want to tell you, I want to cross-examine them. And lastly, let's see, and thank you for giving me the extra minute here. We need to start facing reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porgans. Rain Thompson, followed by Ara Adarian. Rain's gone. That was one of the ones I just got. Ara, thank you for staying, followed by Steve Adamo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, staff. It's been a long day, and we really do appreciate all of your time and effort and consideration. My remarks here are more or less a collection of the thoughts that have occurred to me through the day, and so I'll apologize in advance for any confusion. There's been a conflation of a lot of issues, and I've had a hard time sorting through it all. I think beginning with the morning with the pie chart that was an illustration of where water went in the delta, and the notion that somehow salinity barrier water was an outflow was kind of new to me, and kind of a lack of representation of how much of that water was subsidized by the project, I think would have been an interesting add. The notion of a
I think it was about with the project.
Theoretical export was interesting too, or the lack of identifying the 1.25 million acre feet that were diverted within the delta, equal to the projects, but unregulated anything like it. So that was a point of confusion for us, exactly what was trying to be illustrated there. I think another point of confusion is this issue about salmon. A lot of concerns about the terrible situation that we saw last year. Certainly the portion of the TUCP that's been denied this year isn't going to affect upstream operations in any way, and the notion that last year's TUCP somehow was the cause of those terrible salmon spawning numbers is kind of defies logic. But I was sympathetic to Dick Poole's points earlier. 2008 was a terrible year for them. Harvest was cut off. 7 wasn't good. 9 wasn't particularly good either. Those fish all swam out in the very rich and wet years of 2004 and 5 and 6, and oddly enough didn't come back in big numbers. NIMS told us it wasn't project operations, it was ocean conditions, and we believed them. And then conversely, the fish that swam out in those very dry years, 2007 and 8 and 9, returned in near record numbers in 10 and 11 and 12. So it is confusing how these species behave in drought and manage to survive through it. I think most puzzling perhaps was the presentation by TBI. John Rosenfield did a fine job of demonstrating what I think we all know, that there are a number of species that have been in decline for a number of years, and those declines are startling indeed, but not at all the result of the TUCP. And yet the suggestion is, implement D1641, which has been in place for 2 decades of those declines. And so I'm having a hard time seeing how their solution was preventing the problem in the past. There's a lot of fear about extinction. The fish agencies have told us that they don't believe, anyways, that extinction is in the cards, at least with respect to this particular request that's been made, to more appropriately share that last and small increment of water destined for the ocean outflow for pumping. The less than 2,000 CFS of water that's been replaced in the scheme of it all is mighty small, and I think their concurrence that this request would not result in jeopardy sort of takes me to the most puzzling part of it all today, and that's been this notion of different standards. And I guess what I've wondered is jeopardy is defined. I mean, we know what it is. We can go, we can look it up, we can see what someone thinks it means. The notion of reasonableness isn't. At least I haven't been able to find a definition of it anywhere. It's one person's perspective as best as I can tell. And given the dire straits that we're in, I guess I wonder why the standard of jeopardy, if indeed we want to compare standards under these circumstances, isn't in fact the appropriate standard. Situations are dire everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're a fish in the system or a farmer and his family in San Joaquin Valley or a fir tree in the Sierras. It's been a terrible situation, but this all relates to drought, not the TUCP. And so if we're going to sit down and talk about the effects of drought, we need to step back and start doing a little bit more than just sitting down and saying, well, nope, that last little increment of 2,000 CFS pumping, that's what's going to shove us all off the edge. So we're here again all day consistently requesting that the board overrule that denial. We think that in the light of great scientific uncertainty and debate about the meaning of those benefits, Board Member Dodek had asked earlier for quantification of the impacts. I think the fish agencies have already stated they're unquantifiable, and I don't think there's any biologist you can ask within our organizations or the environmental organizations that could tell you otherwise. But there's certainly a lot more that we could do if, in fact, drought is, the thing that we're going to take on. But that, again, is very different than the discrete, small, measured, balanced, well-thought-out request that was put before you and that was denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ottermoser. Thank you. You've been here all day as well.
Good evening, Chairman Marcus, other members of the board. Thank you for your patience and all of the time you're spending here today. My name is Steve Ottermoser. I'm the Water Resources Manager at Friant Water Authority, and I think Jenny Buckman was, I think, deferred from earlier. She's going to present more of a broad